Well, since Michael Brown, you've got me for another hour. And in fact, you may have me for several more hours, depending on what happens the rest of the week. So just suck it up, Buttercup. Everything's going to be fine. There's a part of me, those of you who've listened to me over the years, by the way, shameless plug here. If you like my program, you can listen to me every day on KHOW from 2 to 4 p.m. And if from 2 to 4 p.m., if those 2 hours aren't enough, which you can get the podcast of those 2 hours on the iHeartRadio app, or you can get it on iTunes or wherever you download your podcast. You can also get an extra 30 minutes or an hour, just depending on what my mood is, of me talking about different things that I think are important in the news by going to what I call the third hour of the Michael Brown Show, which is called Michael Brown Unplugged. And that's a separate podcast, which is also available on the iHeart app or on iTunes or wherever you might download your particular podcast. If you like the program and if you like the podcast, please do me a favor. I'm begging you here. Be sure and hit subscribe, so that every day when the podcasts are uploaded that morning or that evening, you'll get the 2 hours of my terrestrial radio program, and then you'll get the podcast, Michael Brown Unplugged, downloaded to your device. Simply amazing, isn't it? Technology is amazing. So that's my shameless plug. Oh, I guess I should also put a shameless plug in for social media. If you want to follow me on social media, on Facebook, it's Michael D. Brown. And if you have to do two things on Facebook. One, you have to like the page. It's a verified page, facebook.com/Michael D. Brown. Once you find that page, you have to click like. If you click like on Michael D. Brown on Facebook, that gives you the opportunity to join a discussion group called Michael Brown Unplugged that we have on the Facebook page. And that's where you can talk about stories that I've talked about, where you can tell me things that you'd like for me to talk about. Sometimes I pay attention, sometimes I don't pay attention, but I'm always curious about what the audience wants to hear, because I really try to, I try to do my, first and foremost, I talk about things that interest me. And the reason I do that is because if I'm interested in something, I'm going to be much more informed and much more passionate about how and how I describe the particular aspects of whatever that issue is. But I'm always curious about what the audience wants. Now, there are all sorts of ways. You can follow me on Twitter at Michael Brown USA. You can do the Facebook thing. You can like the Facebook page, and then you can ask to join the discussion group, which, by the way, is a closed group, because I know this comes as a surprise, but there are people out there that, I know Ryan finds this hard to believe, but there are people out there that don't like me. I don't get it. I'm such a likable person. But anyway, so we try to make sure that the people in the discussion group are people that don't necessarily agree with everything I say or don't like everything that I talk about, but are willing to have a civil discussion. That's all I'm asking for, is just a civil discussion. I think that's what's missing in so many aspects of our lives, which leads me to the first story I want to talk about this hour. You know Ellen DeGeneres. Now, when I was doing the afternoon drive program regularly before I got sent to rehab, then do you think how many people, Ryan, do you think actually believe I'm in rehab, or I was in rehab? Because I'm beginning to believe that I was in rehab. Because when I look back on those 4 months, it was pretty much rehab. Talk show host Ellen DeGeneres. Now, we used to laugh about when I was doing afternoon drive, because Ellen DeGeneres usually came on. I think she's, I don't remember whether she's ABC or CBS. Maybe it's NBC. But she used to be on that monitor. There's two monitors up here in the studio. One which is incessantly on Fox News, which is fine with me. And the other one, I think, is on the NBC affiliate, Channel 9. But anyway, Ellen DeGeneres used to show up while I was doing my program. And every once in a while during the break, I'd turn the volume up because I'd be curious about what Ellen was talking about. Now, Ellen is openly gay, to which I say, BFD. I don't care. I just truly don't care about people's sexual preferences. Just leave animals alone and leave kids alone. And beyond that, consenting adults, have at it. Well, anyway, she goes to a Dallas Cowboys and Green Bay Packers game in Arlington, Texas. I point out that particular game because my old boss, George W. Bush, is a big Dallas Cowboys fan. Of course, he used to own the Texas Rangers, was involved in baseball, and whenever he and I were together, I mean, not always, but he'd ask me about the Broncos, he'd ask me about the Rockies. We would talk about when we weren't having serious conversations, or I wasn't getting my butt chewed out, or I wasn't telling him how something wasn't working or whatever. We might talk a little sports. Well, anyway, so Ellen DeGeneres goes to the football game. She sits next to the former president. Now, I want to ask, and this is a serious question, because I can tell you what my answer is. Michael, listen, the Broncos are playing, and Barack Obama is going to be at the game. Would you like to go sit next to him? What do you think my answer is? My answer is, of course I'll go sit next to Barack Obama. Because during the course of a 3-hour football game, or whatever it turns out to be, there's going to be an opportunity to talk about politics. I'm going to take that opportunity. I disagree with everything that Barack Hussein Obama did and that he stands for. That doesn't mean I can't sit next to him at a football game and have a conversation. So it's not a rhetorical question for you. It's a serious question. Wouldn't you do the same thing? Well, that's what Ellen did. So Ellen has the opportunity to go sit next to George W. Bush. And the left excoriates her. Somebody by the name of John Nann, KDFW07. Only at the Cowboys game, Georgia and Laura Bush singing the national anthem with Ellen DeGeneres and Portia de Rossi, America. But then it starts to go downhill. It doesn't matter if you're gay or straight, just untouchably rich and white, of course. Or this one. As Ellen is a gleeful participant in the George W. Bush Rehabilitation Project, I'd just like to point out George W. Bush's 2004 re-election relied upon pushing state ballot initiatives banning same-sex marriage and pushing for a constitutional amendment banning it. That's only partially true. George W. Bush did not oppose civil unions. He did think that marriage was between a man and a woman. Can you not make that distinction? Well, apparently that person can't. Or this. So quirky and fun to see George Bush out with Ellen at a Cowboys game after his terrible foreign policy decisions killed thousands of innocent people. Or this one. Ellen donates to Pete Buttigieg and goes to ball games with George W. Bush. Don't be like Ellen. Or this one. Ellen DeGeneres laughing it up as someone who has actively tried to harm our community feels disappointing, irresponsible, and dangerous. Can I tell you something? Do you know how many gay individuals worked in the White House? I can think of 4 people, 3 men and a woman, openly gay, that worked not like me in a cabinet department, although I was at the White House almost every single day, particularly post 9/11. These are people who actually worked in the West Wing. George W. Bush does not care if you're gay. He may think, and I've never asked him the question, and now I regret not having asked him the question. Maybe I'll send the chief of staff an email and ask, does the president hate gay people? Because I don't think that he does. He may think that it's a sin. He may think that it's wrong in from some moral point of view, but he does not hate gay individuals. And I think this is an example of how intolerant the left is. Absolutely intolerant. Because all she did was go to a game. Well, she had a response. And I think the response is worth listening to.
It happened this weekend. I know it's Tuesday. Sometimes I like to ruminate on things all day Monday so that on Tuesday you hear about it. So this weekend I went to Dallas for the Cowboys game. And, thanks. And it may not seem like a big deal for a celebrity to attend a football game, but I never leave my house, so it is a big deal. I go through the drive-thru at Wendy's, so I only have to see one person. I'm that kind of person. So there were 100,000 people in this stadium. Beautiful stadium, by the way, that Dallas has. So Portia and I were invited by Charlotte Jones. She's the daughter of Jerry Jones, who owns the Dallas Cowboys. And we went because we wanted to keep up with the Joneses. So we get to sit in this very fancy suite because, he owns the whole place. So his suite is fancy, and he's got fancy friends. And I don't mean fancy like Real Housewife fancy. I mean like fancy. Look, I took a video of who was next to me.
She's showing the video. There's Bush making a face out of laughing. Which is typical George Bush.
Fancy. So that was Portia, and that was Charlotte Jones. Portia was talking to, and George W. Bush, and then in front of us was the tallest man in the world. So I've got to say, when we were invited, I was aware that I was going to be surrounded with people from very different views and beliefs. And I'm not talking about politics. I was rooting for the Packers, and get this, everybody in the Cowboys suite was rooting for the Cowboys. And so I had to hide my cheese hat in Portia's purse. And don't get me wrong, I like the Cowboys. I love the Cowboys. I love all the Village people, as a matter of fact. But Aaron Rodgers is a friend of mine. He's the quarterback for the Packers, and so I'm sitting in the Cowboys suite, the owner of the Cowboys, and secretly cheering every time the Packers scored or every time another whistleblower came forward. And the referees, you guys, the referees. But during the game, they showed a shot of George and me laughing together, and so people were upset. They thought, why is a gay Hollywood liberal sitting next to a conservative Republican president? Didn't even notice I'm holding the brand new iPhone 11. And but a lot of people were mad, and they did what people do when they're mad. They tweet, and but here's one tweet that I loved. This person says, Ellen and George Bush together makes me have faith in America again. And the thing. I'm friends with George Bush. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of people who don't share the same beliefs that I have. We're all different, and I think that we've forgotten that that's okay, that we're all different. For instance, I wish people wouldn't wear fur. I don't like it, but I'm friends with people who wear fur. And I'm friends with people who are furry, as a matter of fact. I have friends who should tweeze more. And I have, but just because I don't agree with someone on everything doesn't mean that I'm not going to be friends with them. When I say be kind to one another, I don't mean only the people that think the same way that you do. I mean be kind to everyone. Doesn't matter.
Who can argue with that? I don't think that Ellen DeGeneres and I probably agree on much of any public policy. But she strikes me as an incredibly funny, likable, enjoyable person that I would not, just like I would love to sit next to Barack Obama. I wouldn't mind sitting next to Ellen DeGeneres and having a conversation about wherever it goes. It doesn't have to be about her sexual preference, because I don't give a rat's ass about her sexual preference. But it might be, for example, she talked about, and I know it was a joke, but she talked about, I drive through the Wendy's because that way I only have to see one person. When you're as recognizable as someone as Ellen DeGeneres, it does become difficult at times to lead what you might want to consider to be an ordinary life. I'm nowhere at that level. Nowhere. And I don't pretend to be, and I'm not saying that I'm anywhere near the level of Ellen DeGeneres. That's obvious. But I go out and people recognize my voice. And then people want to talk to me. And that's fine. I appreciate my fans. I appreciate the people that listen to the radio program. I appreciate people that listen to my podcast. I appreciate people that read my book. I appreciate people that want to interact with me. But I get it too, because some people don't know how to interact with public figures. They think that because they listen to you every day, or because someone like me is so transparent about what I think and what I do, and about my family life and my friends and everything else, and I want that relationship. I want people to make that connection. But there are times, like Ellen, when I just want to drive through Wendy's and just get my burger and just go on about my way. I respect Ellen for that. And I also respect her ability to sit next to George Bush. Let me tell you something about George Bush. As someone who has sat next to him in serious moments, in lighthearted moments, in moments that you would not believe the seriousness of the nature of whatever it is that we might have been talking about. But George Bush is a decent human being. He and I may not agree on everything. In fact, I disagree with a lot of his policies. I disagreed vociferously with the staff and others about the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, yet because I was willing to speak my mind logically and rationally, they made me the Undersecretary of Homeland Security. Better to have someone who opposes it inside of it than to have someone outside of it ripping it apart. Maybe he can help fix it. Hey, welcome back to the program, everybody. Michael Brown filling in for Dan Caplis. Glad to have you with me. Just a reminder, you got to plug, right? You got to self-promote. If you want to listen to more of Michael Brown, you can do that from 2 to 4 p.m. on 630 KHAL, Monday through Friday. And if you want even more than that, you can subscribe to my personal podcast, Michael Brown Unplugged, which is available just like the podcast of this radio program and my radio program are available on the iHeart app and on iTunes or wherever podcasts are downloaded, as they say. And by the way, 99.97% of all dentists approve of the listening of the Michael Brown Unplugged podcast and the Michael Brown Show. So you need to do that. I want to talk for a minute about acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan. He was heckled off the stage at a conference yesterday on immigration. He was supposed to be the keynote speaker at a conference hosted by the Migration Policy Institute at the Georgetown University Law Center. Now, I've spoken at Georgetown, and in fact, the first time I spoke at Georgetown was very shortly after Hurricane Katrina. So as you can imagine, it was fairly controversial, but here's what happens, and I think here's the difference. When I spoke to them, I started out by talking about, and I shouldn't give away all my secrets about how I open my keynote addresses, but I immediately try to draw the audience in by relating to what I think they may be thinking. In other words, I look out at the audience, and I know that they're looking at me. Some are looking at me with, respect. Some are looking at me with derision. Some people are looking at me with confusion, like, what am I doing here? Am I in the wrong room? And I play off that by talking about what they may be thinking as a way to diffuse them. Now, I don't know about McAleenan. I've not met him. I have met his chief of staff, and his chief of staff is a very smart young man, and I hope he's doing good work for the secretary, or I should say the acting secretary. By the way, parenthetical here, Mr. President, you need to get these nominations up. I realize that we're coming near the end of your first term, but people in acting positions are just that. They're actors. They need to have that Senate confirmation that gives them the authority to go do what they need to do and not feel like I'm just here temporarily. Into my parenthetical comment. Anyway, so McAleenan was supposed to be this keynote speaker at Georgetown, but protesters interrupted his speech almost immediately after he was introduced. Now, a bunch of people held a big banner up that said, "Hate is not normal," and then started chanting, "When immigrants are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back." Now, to give the moderator some credit, they tried to get things under control, but the protesters kept interrupting his speech almost immediately after every opportunity of getting people to calm down. It would erupt again. Here's the acting secretary trying to start over
Thanks,
again.
Doris. We'll give it one more shot. As a career law enforcement professional, I've dedicated my career to protecting the right to free speech and all the values we hold dear in America from all threats. So we'll go ahead and try one more time. But otherwise, I'm going to go back to work and keep trying to secure this country. I appreciate it. I had a very serious Here, you can post them on your website. Let me try and...
Colleagues, you're invoking democracy. Democracy requires dialogue. It requires listening. It requires a two-way street. The Secretary has agreed to take questions and answers. We are robbing time from the period of questions and answers where he can engage with the public. Could we please listen to his remarks and then have a chance to question him, including people who disagree with him may question him.
And he walks back to the podium to try again.
Last time, team. Lot to cover today. There's some very serious issues that we can talk about in candor, in a real dialogue, or we can continue to shout. Okay, what I was going to start with is that I'd like to take our dialogue this morning above the politics in the daily news cycle, talk about the challenges and efforts that we faced over the past year, but also given that this is primarily an audience of immigration lawyers, advocates, and law students, to also talk about some of the fundamental issues we face with the current legal framework and its ability to address large-scale immigration flows. Okay. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day. And he walks off. Now, what did that accomplish? It accomplished exactly nothing. Nothing at all. I would actually like to hear an interaction between people who oppose the immigration policies of this administration, who as law students, as freaking law students, I would like to hear their questions, and I'd like to hear what the acting Secretary of Homeland Security has to say. Because I think both sides can learn something. I'm not even saying that we can find common ground, because I hate that phrase. I'm not sure there is common ground. But you know what we can do? We can understand what each side thinks, why they think that, and then we can figure out a way, whether it's politics, it's a courtroom, whether it's a radio program, whatever, it's dealing with your boss at work, whatever it is. This is a real bugaboo of mine, is learning to understand what other people think and why they think the way that they do. I have said that when I walked into a courtroom, whether it was a trial, a hearing on a motion, whatever it might be, do you know what my number one job was? I mean, obviously to represent my client zealously and within the bounds of the law. But my number one job was to, if I'm going to represent my client zealously, I have to understand where the other side is coming from. I have to understand, I have to have read their briefs, I have to have read their motions, I have to have read all of the cases that they cited in their motion to dismiss or motion for summary judgment or whatever it might be. I have to understand what their arguments are. Because if I don't, I can't even have a hope of winning my case. every time, and I think what drives me back crap crazy the most about this is one of the most prestigious law schools in the country, Georgetown Law School. Although one of my dearest friends graduated from there, so it must not be that prestigious. But, I mean, if he could get in, I mean, good grief, anybody can get in, right? Right, Andy? Right. In all seriousness, here was an opportunity for all of those for all of those goobers that are shouting him down. Here was a chance for them, even if they wanted to pontificate and just make a statement. I don't like you or your policies because X. You know what that does? That gives the acting Secretary of Homeland Security an opportunity to say, okay, let me think about why you object to my policies or the statement of administration positions. We call those SAPs. It would give him a chance to either rebut, to respond, to explain, to maybe give them some insight into why our policies are the way they are. And in fact, they might even come away surprised. They might come away understanding that, well, this, and again, I go back to the fact that this is freaking Georgetown Law School. They might even come away with an understanding of what the law is, which is what they're supposed to be learning. Not just how to think, not how to be a critical, analytical thinker, but to understand the basics of the law. We have somehow developed in this country the idea that shouting down other people is a way to convince other people of the righteousness of your position. When you try to shout me down, when you try to keep me from explaining, defending, arguing, making my point by shouting me down, I don't give a rat's ass what you think. I don't care what your position is. Because if you don't give me the opportunity to either explain or to at least outline my position and an opportunity to understand and hear your position, we have nothing to do here. I'm surprised. The Secretary of Homeland, the acting secretary, attempted three times to make his presentation. And three times, people, and I shouldn't lump all of them in. They may not all be law students. But they stole an opportunity for other students to learn. And they also told me this, and I believe this from the bottom of my heart. The left are the modern-day fascists. They're the modern-day Marxists. And some, just like a certain council member in the Denver City Council, are today's self-avowed communists. Their willingness to be useful idiots for an ideology that would take away their ability to shout down people. Don't get me wrong. Do they have a right to shout down the Secretary of Homeland Security? I would argue that they do. They have the right to do that, although the university likewise has the opportunity and has the right to establish the rules of conduct by which a speaker comes in and presents their perhaps minority report, their minority viewpoint. The university has the right to do that, which means then, if you're going to participate in that venue, in that event, then you need to comply with the rules of conduct. And if you learn to comply with the rules of conduct, you might actually learn something. But I don't think they're willing. I don't think they want to learn. They don't understand that the best thing they could do is to understand the administration's position and then come at it with logic, rational thinking, reasonableness, a solid, valid argument. Then you can have a dialogue. Then you can have a conversation. I'm always fascinated. I have friends here in town that are, we're just opposites. Particularly some of my millennial friends. Yeah, I've got millennial friends. You find that weird? I don't find it weird at all. I value my millennial friends. And I value them for a couple of reasons. Psychologically, they keep me young. They keep me on my toes. But it also gives me an insight. Because I would lump my millennial friends into two groups. Those who understand our government, our social compact. They understand how we operate as a government and as a society. And so clearly my conversations with them are a lot easier. And to some degree, yes, I admit it's an echo chamber. But to my millennial friends who are opposite of me, they're ethnically diverse. They're politically diverse. Some even refer to me as an old white Republican, and that's kind of part of my problem. And I try to explain to them, from your point of view, me being an old white Republican, which I kind of laugh at because if you've ever actually listened to this program, I am more than willing to take on the Republican Party because I think the Republican Party sometimes is its own worst enemy. Shouting Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the former press secretary, out of a restaurant. The harassing of Ted Cruz at a restaurant, I think it was in Austin, and then he's accosted at LAX. Why? What is it about? We have come to the point, because somebody, somewhere, sometime is going to get hurt. I don't say that as a threat, but I do say it this way. If I'm in a restaurant, and again, I'm not anywhere like Ted Cruz or Ellen DeGeneres or Kevin McAleenan. I'm not that anymore. I'm the former Undersecretary of Homeland Security. I am the former Director of FEMA. So that life is a different part of my life than it is now. But I can tell you this. I get hassled in a restaurant. I get hassled in a movie theater. I get hassled when I'm giving a speech. I'm walking off the stage. But you make a threat to my family, like they did to Sarah Huckabee Sanders or they do to Ted Cruz. At some point, somebody has to stand up and say, no more. I don't know what that means. I don't know, and I am not advocating violence, but it has to come to an end. I think it's a failure of education in general, public education in particular. I think it's a failure of parenting. I think it is a failure on so many levels. Individually, societally, we have failed to help people understand that you and I can have differences of opinion. And the founders set up a system where if we reach a loggerhead, we reach a loggerhead. And at some point, when the loggerhead becomes intractable and there's no movement on either side, that loggerhead may exist for weeks, months, or years. But it is the nature of humans that at some point something gives. There's a crack somewhere. Somebody in the back of the room. Have you ever seen that photograph? There's this iconic photograph of all these Nazis. They're at a speech that Hitler's giving. And everybody is sitting there, Heil Hitler, hand in the air. And there's a sea of people. And in the middle of the sea of people, there's one human, one individual who does not have his hand up, who is looking straight ahead. That's what I mean. There's always one individual. One individual may be on your side, may be on the opposition side. But somebody somewhere stops and says, you know, I'm kind of tired of this loggerhead. Is there anything? Is there any way? Is there something that we can do? This country is at a loggerhead. I don't know how long the loggerhead will last, nor do I care. But what I do know is, if you stand on principle and you stand on your beliefs, at some point, you or somebody will be that one individual that starts the ripple effect